Right. Hopefully we're back. Hopefully you can hear me now. Can you guys hear me? Is anybody online yet? Right. Hopefully. Nice to see you online, Gerbeck Singh. Thanks for joining us. We've had a bit of a technical hiccup to start with on today's show. So thanks for joining us. I'm just going to hope that some of the others who were originally on when we first started the show are going to join us shortly again, because we had no sound again. So, but we hopefully have sound. I'm hoping you can hear me, Gerbeck Singh. Maybe you can give me a thumbs up or a Sat Sri Akal if you can hear me. Then I know we are broadcasting properly now. Ah, yes, TC, you are back as well. You found us again. So can you hear me this time, guys? Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully after a little hiccup. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Gerbeck Singh. Thanks for that confirmation. Right, that sounds more promising. I think we're ready to go a little bit more positively now. Let me just restart everything so we're ready to go again. And hello, Harjit Dugal. Thanks for joining us as well. Lots of thumbs up from Harjit Dugal. Great stuff. Loud and clear. Always great to hear. Right, let me get the share recording so I can also upload it to the site, and then we're there. Okay, thanks, guys. Here we go. Indeed, yes. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Perspectives. Thanks for joining us after our first few technical issues. Indeed, we're back again. It's Tuesday, back to Perspectives, and in today's show, hopefully you can hear me this time. Yes, indeed. We're going to follow yesterday's RSS story with the bigger picture Hindutva apologists don't want you to see, just how deep the RSS actually runs through Modi's cabinet. And of course, the organization's own documented admiration for Mussolini and Hitler in the 1930s. Yes, a few uncomfortable facts that they rather brush over. And here in the UK, London Sikhs are preparing to protest outside the BBC this weekend, after the corporation just happened to call the deposed heir to the Sikh Empire an Indian king, of course, decades before India even existed. And Jagtar Singh Johal has now spent close to 9 years in a Punjabi jail. We'll tell you exactly just who the UK's brand new special envoy for cases like his actually is, but more importantly, what a United Nations torture expert has already said about the appointment. Makes interesting listening. A classified Canadian intelligence report recently names the exact gangster who allegedly rode a student visa straight into the Bishnoi network's Canadian criminal organisation, and just how Ottawa quietly dropped him from its most wanted list. Very questionable goings on there in Ottawa. And in Punjab itself, Warriors Punjab Day, they've just announced their candidate for the 2027 Punjab elections. It just happens to be, very interestingly, the son of one of the Indira Gandhi's assassins. We'll tell you who. I'm sure you can probably guess. And of course, why it matters. All this and loads more on today's show. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at loads of your comments, which have been pouring in. So do stay tuned for that. And of course, as I say, do keep your live comments coming in. I do appreciate them very much. It's great to see you guys online. And if you have any specific questions for me that you'd like to ask me during the show, as always, please just pop them in capitals and keep it short, just so it catches my eye, so I can just quickly dip into them and see your questions. Right, let's get on with today's show. And indeed, yeah, this is the RSS. Now, I'm sure you guys have seen over recent times, because the RSS has been so much in the spotlight recently. I've certainly noticed on social media a lot of Hindutva IT cells, pro-Hindutva Hindus have been talking about the RSS in very very positive terms. They say, look, it's just some wonderful cultural organization. How dare you call them fascist or whatever? But to counter that, I'm actually just going to run through a little bit of factual information that actually might help you guys when you come across these guys on social media, just to remind them of the truth about why people are pushing back against the RSS, particularly in Western democracies. So in yesterday's show, I did tell you that more than 40 Canadian civil society groups, and actually potentially up to 200, plus 2 federal members of parliament, have now officially asked Ottawa to ban RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat from entering Canada ahead of his visit at the end of this month. And a separate letter is actually now circulating officially. It was sent specifically to the Honorary Gary Anand Desangari, the Minister of Public Safety in Canada, but it was a public letter and it has been published publicly. It's been put into the public domain to allow everybody to read it and understand really what it's all about. This is the letter, page 2 there, signed by Heather McPherson. She's the MP for Edmonton Strathcona, and she's also officially the NDP critic for Foreign Affairs. Also signed by Jenny Kwan. She's the MP for Vancouver East, and she is the NDP critic for immigration and for public safety. So again, 2 very high-profile figures have actually signed this important letter. So anyway, I'm not going to go over the ground I talked about yesterday about the RSS. But what I want to do today is actually answer this question that maybe I guess a lot of you guys are asking as well. I mean, we've all heard of the RSS, but what is it? What is it really? And why does Bhagwat, this Bhagwat character, why does his specific visa matter so much? Why is it so important to banish him from North America? Well, let's start with how thoroughly, of course, the RSS has embedded itself inside the government of India itself, because the numbers are not vague, they're well known. And I'm going to rattle off some facts and interesting sort of facts and figures now, just to support what I'm saying. Of course, Narendra Modi himself, he is a former RSS pracharak. He was a full-time and is a full-time RSS worker. And that's a fact confirmed by the RSS's own record. They don't try and hide it. There's no allegation there. He is part of the RSS. Of course, Home Minister Amit Shah. He came up through the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, that is the ABVP. So again, that is part of the RSS. That actually, the ABVP is the RSS's own student wing. So both Amit Shah and Narendra Modi were essentially educated and brought up through the RSS's own nurturing growth program. And that, if you look at an analysis of Modi's Council of Ministers, it's repeatedly found that somewhere around 7 in every 10 cabinet ministers carries a documented Sangh background. RSS pracharaks, ABVP alumni, that organisation, or just simple family lineage tracing back to the organisation for decades. So the BJP itself isn't just coincidentally sitting next to the RSS. It is, of course, its direct part. It is part of the RSS. Now, the BJP's predecessor, that was a party called the Bharatiya Jana Sangh, the BJS, that was originally founded in 1951 explicitly as the RSS's political wing. So when Sangh officials then meet cabinet ministers to discuss government policy now, as they obviously routinely do, including on important things like education policy, it's not outside influence on India's government. It's not the RSS influencing the Indian government. It's basically the RSS meeting with itself, because the Indian government is the RSS. So, let's dispel any sort of myths about the RSS being outside the Indian government. It is effectively in control of the Indian government. And that is important if, you actually look at what it means then subsequently for how we read every other Indian story going forward. And of course, in the past, I've talked about India. So when I talk about the Modi government has done, something in Kashmir or something else on minority rights or something else in the Punjab, it's very quick and easy to sort of jump say, it's the BJP. It's one political party's policy, subject to the ordinary give and take of democratic politics. But it's not. And what I just talked about, what I just told you, those pracharak numbers tell you is that there's a very often there is no daylight between government policy and RSS doctrine at all. So the people setting the policy and the people running the RSS's neighborhood shackers are, in most cases, the same people at different points in the same career. In other words, they're all part and parcel and connected with or part of the RSS. So that's the lens that you've got to look through every time we talk about India or an Indian story, because, of course, it matters. So, oops, sorry, here we go. There we go. These two characters. I want to talk a little bit about the history of the RSS, because this really matters. And so I'm just going to check the comments, the live streaming comments, because they suddenly seem to have stopped. I don't know if you guys are still there. Hopefully you are. But so they do seem to have stopped, which always is a sign that something's gone technically wrong, but hopefully not. But anyway, I'll carry on and hope that you guys are still there. Anyway, so I want to talk about the history of the RSS's Western defenders and the coordinated networks of Hindutva accounts, these IT cells that flood social media with this sort of message. Oh, no, the RSS is just a cultural organization. But I'm going to talk about some of the facts that these guys might not be aware of, or at least if they are aware of, they certainly don't trumpet them out loud, let's say. So the RSS itself was founded in 1925 in Nagpur by K.B. Hedgewar. He's the guy on the stamp just there. His mentor was a guy called B.S. Moonjay. He's the guy on top there. Now, his mentor, Moonjay, traveled to Rome in 1931 and there met Benito Mussolini personally. He toured the fascist youth. He toured the military academies, the Balila and the Avanguardista, I think they were called. They were those organizations, those fascist organizations that trained Italian children for war. So Moonjay met the chief fascist in Italy, Mussolini. He then came home and modeled the RSS's daily drills, the uniforms, and its hierarchy directly on what he'd seen in Italy, and then went on to found the Bonsala Military School to formalize it. So, in other words, the RSS's roots are undeniably based on fascism and what Moonjay discovered in fascist 1930s Italy. So then his protege, Hedgewar, built the RSS on those same fascist organizational principles from day one. So, and it doesn't stop there. It gets worse. Because Hedgewar's successor, this guy, M.S. Golwalkar, he then led the RSS from 1940 to 1973. And he wrote a book in 1939 called We or Our Nation Defined. This guy, Golwalkar, held up Nazi Germany's treatment of its Jewish population as, in his own words, a lesson worth learning for how India should handle its own minorities. Now, again, just think about that statement. It's horrific. It's not a stray remark taken out of context. It wasn't something that he just sort of said casually or almost mistakenly. Historians who actually studied his book describe everything that he puts in that book and statements like this, basically as the first systematic statement of RSS ideology, what it is. And it remains part of the organization's intellectual inheritance today. Nothing has changed. This is what the RSS is and was, what it was based on. And that inheritance that the RSS has taken today, it doesn't stay confined to this 1939 book. Today, the RSS sits at the center of what's called the Sangh Parivar. That is, it's a family of affiliated organizations built outward from that original drill ground model. And it includes all sorts of thousands, literally, of affiliated organizations. It includes things like the Vishva Hindu Parishad, the openly militant Bajrang Dal, the ABVP, that I talked about, that obviously shaped people like Amit Shah, the Vidya Bharti, that's the RSS's own education network, which now runs more than 20,000 schools across India. And you obviously can then understand the significance of that, indoctrinating children into this RSS model. Millions of children in India are now being taught in RSS's own schools. It's frightening, it has to be said. And the organisation marked its centenary in 2025, 100 years, on its own telling, and it set out publicly, of unbroken growth from that Nagpur drill ground into the ideological infrastructure now running the world's most populous country. So you can see that it doesn't matter what all these RSS supporters say on social media. You just need to throw this back at them and say, you are a fascist organization. Your roots were designed by the founders of the RSS on Italian and German fascism, the Nazi Party, Hitler's Nazis, and Mussolini in Italy. Again, it's fact. It's in the public domain. It's undeniable. So, hi, Avatar Dylan. Nice to see you online as well. WHO Panzer, you're there as well. Nice to see you. Golwalker, then Savaka. Yes, indeed. All were fascists. They were, absolutely. Even the one who shot Gandhi was an RSS member fascist. Fascism is what will eat them up and destroy them eventually due to corruption. Yeah, as I always say, the people always win in the end. Fascism is so anti-democratic. And every fascist state that's ever existed always falls apart because the people always win in the end. That is what I have always said and will always maintain, which is why the RSS will lose in the end. They will be like the tide. They will come in and feel like they're flooding the world, but then that tide inevitably will go out. So anyway, the RSS and its defenders do reject publicly a lot of this sort of framing that I've just talked about. And there is now a campaign circulating in Canada. Here it is. On a website in Canada in response to those original, that letter I showed you at the beginning, that 2-page letter. Of course, Hindutva and the RSS have immediately mobilized, saying, right, we need to fight back against this. And they've set up a new campaign, and it's on this website here. And it's in response to that letter that describes the RSS. Well, at least in this letter, and in fact, I'll show you. It's a form that you can fill in online. It's one of those forms that does all the work for you. All you basically need to do is put your name at the top and press send, and it sends a pre-written email to the Canadian government to say, no, the RSS is wonderful. We're a cultural organization. And what it actually says, there you go. It's long and boring, but it's essential nonsense. It's a complete piece of propaganda. Basically, what it does, it tries to describe the RSS as a purely civic association with 89,000 daily neighborhood gatherings, more than 152,000 service projects in disaster relief, medicine, education. And of course, unsurprisingly, it completely dismisses comparisons to fascism, claiming it's a slur that then erases a century of community work. Well, right, okay. That's the argument that you'll hear. And, well, you can believe it if you wish. But unfortunately, an organization's charity work in 2026, it might be there, but it does not erase what its founding generation wrote and did in the 1930s and what it continues to do in India today. So you can put those two facts side by side. Yeah, it's a charitable organization, but it's still a fascist, evil organization. And of course, the RSS defenders are only looking at one side of that. So, make up your own mind. So, for what it's worth, of course, the US Commission on International Religious Freedoms, USCIRF, they have, a few months ago, flagged the RSS for religious freedom violations. I think it's back in March. And the RSS has, in fact, of course, been banned inside India itself 3 times, which I talked about yesterday. Yeah, that is fact. It's not news. We all know that. But today's news is that the argument over what the RSS actually is has now landed formally on a Canadian minister's desk. They now have no choice but to address what was in that original letter and actually maybe start considering that the RSS isn't just a supposedly cultural charitable organization. And it does matter, because every time any Hindutva-aligned account on social media insists the RSS is it's India's answer to the Scouts or the Rotary Club like we have here in the UK, it's worth asking why an organization that has nothing to hide needed 3 separate Indian governments across 3 separate decades to ban it before it could then start again and operate again. So charity work and ideological menace aren't mutually exclusive. There are plenty of unpleasant movements throughout history that have run soup kitchens alongside worse things. And holding both facts in your head at once, the charitable service projects and the admiration for fascism, it's not a contradiction. It can still happen. It doesn't stop them being fascist with evil intent. And it's what's taking this organization seriously actually means. And hopefully Ottawa, and indeed the Trump administration in the US, will hopefully put a microscope onto the organization that is the RSS and start asking those uncomfortable questions. Yeah, it might be a cultural organization, but what else is it doing? So anyway, so let's move on. What are you guys talking about? WHA Panzer, RSS BJP, and anything to do with these, whether VHP, VJP, and of course thousands of other acronyms associated with the RSS. They should be banned in North America. Absolutely they should. And this is why we, all of us, need to keep lobbying our political representatives to make that happen. We cannot let them get away with this, because so far, they are, and it's scary. So anyway, but I said that it's the grassroots lobbying that is ensuring that our politicians, whether Canada, the US, here in the UK, or you guys down under, wherever it happens to be, they are aware of it, because otherwise they won't know. So anyway, as I say, keep lobbying, keep campaigning, keep pushing back, keep reminding your political representatives all the way up so they force the message up that political ladder. Anyway, it's the second page of that RSS propaganda piece. If you can be bothered to read it, I wouldn't bother if I were you. Yeah, HAF Kona, amongst many others, and I do talk about both HAF and Kona. They put out regular videos that are just simple propaganda pieces. It's absolutely it's funny. If it wasn't so evil, it would be funny. The stuff that they come out with, it's quite shocking. Anyway, let's move on, and I want to talk about Duleep Singh, and I have talked about Duleep Singh, periodically. He's, of course, he was the son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and his story it's deeply sad. And I'm not going to reiterate his story. We've talked a lot about it, but this story has actually just ignited a bit of a what we call a storm in a teacup. It's a small storm, but it is a significant storm, because actually the implications are more wide-reaching than a simple storm in a teacup. Now, Maharaja Duleep Singh, of course, the son of Ranjit Singh Ji, he was born in Lahore, 6th of September 1838. And he was, of course, that last sovereign, the last great sovereign of the great Sikh Empire that his father, Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji, had built. And young Duleep was proclaimed Maharaja at the grand old age of 5 years old. So the poor lad didn't really have much chance. And by the age of 10, after the Second Anglo-Sikh War, it was the British East India Company then forced him, sadly, to sign away the kingdom, the Sikh Empire, and then surrender up that Kohinoor diamond. And they took him from his mother. And again, the story is deeply tragic. But it was ruthless times, very different times. It's easy for us to judge now, but they were ruthless times. He was taken away from his mother, and he was then shipped back to the UK, and he was exiled in the UK very, very deliberately by the British, because, of course, young Duleep could have been the rallying point for the Sikhs to rally again to fight back against the British. So the British did what they very ruthlessly and very successfully did. They removed any potential nucleus of resistance out of the theatre of war. So they shipped him back to England, and they heaped wealth and praise and everything on him. Poor lad, he was just a young lad. He had no choice, and he really couldn't do anything about it. And he was actually, as it turned out, he was actually baptized a Christian in 1853. Again, probably very deliberately and very cynically by the British, ensured that he totally disengaged from his Sikh roots and his Sikh faith and his Sikh culture. So they deliberately baptized him into Christianity in 1853. And then he lived much of his adult life as an English country gentleman. And he was given an estate in Suffolk, Eldon Hall, it was called. It's a beautiful estate. I've driven past it many times. And he was gifted this huge estate and a stipend, as it's called. That's a payment by Queen Victoria to pay for his upkeep, a very generous stipend. Essentially, he was bribed to keep him quiet, to stop him coalescing, to reigniting any sort of Sikh resistance. So he was basically bribed to become an English gent. And interestingly, though, he reconverted to Sikhism in 1886, and then he did spend his final years, bless him, plotting with Irish and Russian revolutionaries, but he had no choice. He plotted with revolutionaries to try and reclaim Punjab, and then sadly dying in a Paris hotel room in 1893. Now, all that history, I'm telling you all about this history because did that history happen in India? Of course it didn't. India didn't even exist. India was not a country when all of this happened. There was the British Empire. The unified political entity that essentially we now call India, this young country, just never existed in young Duleep's lifetime. And it actually wouldn't exist for at least half a century after his death. However, this is where it starts getting controversial. A recent BBC article did, sadly, this Shivani Chowdhury, this poor, I feel a bit sorry for the journalist. So this journalist wrote an article, and I don't know if Shivani was responsible for the headline. The headline has absolutely ignited the Sikh community who've seen this because, of course, they describe Duleep as an Indian king. Now, Sikh activists are obviously on this, and it's very easy to dismiss it because, it was probably a mistake. It was probably some young journalist who hadn't probably done enough research, doesn't understand, the actual sensitivity of calling Duleep an Indian king. But unsurprisingly, it has ignited a backlash because actually it does matter. And I'll explain why. Because it's one entry in a very long pattern of mainstream media coverage. And the BBC have done this. And I have to say the BBC have done great work for the Sikh community. So I was a little bit reluctant to criticize the BBC, but they got it very wrong on this. But it unfortunately does form this bigger picture pattern of mainstream media coverage, flattening Sikh nationhood into some sort of generic Indian label. Oh, they're all Indians, so we'll just call them Indians. And of course, that is a really deeply sensitive area to start throwing wrong labels around, obviously with all the history that we're aware of. So anyway, unsurprisingly, there is a protest that's planned outside the BBC offices on Saturday, 15th of August. Yes, it's that date again. 15th of August that just appears everywhere now. It's, of course, the very, very important day, Indian Independence Day, which is why so much from the Sikh community is being planned to just highlight the existence of the Sikh community and everything that India had done to the Sikhs. So anyway, so this protest has been designed to happen outside the BBC, August the 15th, that's Saturday, starting at 2 p.m. So if you're around in London, go join the protest. And I think that they do actually expect to have quite a high turnout. Let's have in Portland Place, just off Oxford Circus, if I remember correctly. Yes, it is just off Oxford Circus. So if you're on the tube, get off at Oxford Circus and you can walk to Portland Place. Now, interestingly, it's worth flagging up some of these activists that apparently are going to turn up. They actually have received apparently duty to warn notices from UK police over transnational repression. They're literal threats to life from India. So again, this is why things like this are quite important, because it does actually highlight the fact that their very lives are tied to their advocacy for Sikh sovereignty, which again is part of this whole big story. It is, of course, the same transnational threat pattern that I talk about on a daily basis. So turning up to a protest like this, it's not just obviously about a BBC choice of headline or the wrong headline. So language, and the reason, again, why it is so important, it's not just a storm in a teacup. It does have a wider impact, stuff like this, because it's all about language. And language, as we all know, is deeply, strictly important. Language is how empires and successor states launder history. They rewrite history. So if you call something Indian often enough in a big enough outlet like the BBC and do it for long enough, then it just becomes what people believe, that it was India. He was an Indian king. In other words, you're rewriting, you're embedding into people's subconscious minds a fake narrative. In other words, you're laundering history, the truth of what actually happened. And again, it's not just a grievance explicit to the Sikh community. It's how erasure does work in practice, and it's used in many areas deliberately. Just one small editorial shortcut at a time, one small headline at a time. This is how history is rewritten, is reframed, is changed, is laundered, which I think is the perfect word. And the BBC, obviously, I'm sure they'll correct this very quietly, and if the press, and then they'll move on and they'll forget about it. But it's if this mistake keeps happening, if it keeps recurring, and that's really the big story of this. So it's all very well, protesting once about one headline, but if it keeps happening, we need to stamp on it every single time until they get the message. You cannot get away with rewriting Sikh history, because, of course, the Sikh Empire is one of the fundamental arguments pushing for Khalistan. So let's not let them rewrite the history of the Sikh Empire. It was not India. It was a country in and of itself, predating India. It was there decades before India was ever even heard of. And here we go, the princesses. There's one other fact worth talking about. Duleep Singh's youngest daughter, Princess Sophia, I think she was bottom left in this photo. Princess Sophia, she was actually born in that estate, Elveden Estate, in 1876. She actually became Queen Victoria's goddaughter, believe it or not. Again, part of this sort of very cynical, ruthless methodology that the British did. It's not exclusive to the British. Other empires have done it as well. But essentially, the British did it and practiced it very successfully. So young Princess Sophia became the goddaughter of Queen Victoria. And she grew up, as it turns out, fortunately, she actually moved back to her Sikh principles, despite, I'm sure, the British establishment really resenting it. But she became one of the most militant suffragettes in Edwardian Britain. The suffragette movement is the women's rights. They campaigned for women's rights and for women to get the vote. So again, straight back to the principles of the Sikh Empire, where women were treated as equals on every level, that the British came in and then just completely rewrote. Suddenly women became second-class citizens under the British Empire, as indeed they were here in Britain in the 19th century. Women didn't get the vote till, was it the 1920s or something, 1910s, 1920s. But it was as a result of ladies like Princess Sophia, the suffragette movement, as it was called. And she herself was actually arrested on Black Friday in 1910, selling a newspaper. It was a banned suffragette newspaper outside Hampton Court, one of our big sort of royal buildings, and also defacing her own 1911 census return in protest. So she was very principled. So the same family that the BBC is labeling as Indian actually produced a woman who spent her whole adult life fighting the British establishment from inside. So that's an important point to remember. Let us not forget the work that Princess Sophia did. Just the defiance and her alignment, her absolute faith to obviously her religion, but to her principles of being a Sikh. So again, it's always worth talking about Princess Sophia in the same breath as we also talk about Dooley. So TC, what have you just said? No wonder the average citizen doesn't get why Khalistan's essential. They don't. They may think it's all Indian. And of course, this extends to the argument across North America, where sadly I see article after article now being sort of trotted out, particularly promoted by Hindutva and the IT cells, where Sikhs are now being tarnished with Indian criminals. So, of course, the right wing in North America are now saying, oh, it's those Indian criminals again. Every time a Sikh appears, oh, it's an Indian criminal. Because Sikhs are now perfectly ordinary, decent Sikhs, law-abiding Sikhs, who contributed so much to North American society, not least its supply chain through the trucking industry. They're now being tarnished, painted with the same brush as Indian criminals, the Bishnoi gang, etc. Which, of course, India is leveraging. The RSS and Hindutva are leveraging that to try and align the Bishnoi gang with Sikh extremism. They say they're trying to promote. You've probably seen the photos of Baba Khalsa. There's a photo of, I think it was Lawrence Bishnoi with some representative of Baba Khalsa. I don't know if it's a genuine photograph, but that's being pushed around social media, particularly by the Godi media, to remind everybody in North America, oh, look, Khalistanis and Sikhs, they're all part of the Bishnoi criminal enterprise. They're all a bunch of terrorists and criminals. That's the propaganda that they're pushing, which is, again, leveraging this whole this whole merging Indians with Sikhs. Sikhs are not Indians. Now, some Sikhs might see themselves as Indian. That is their right. But most Sikhs don't. Most Sikhs see themselves as Sikhs or Punjabis or American Sikhs or British Sikhs or whatever, but certainly not as Indians. Anyway, let's jump on to the next story. Jaggi. And I've touched on this before. It's just a bit of an update on what's sort of going on politically speaking, particularly here in the UK about Jaggi. And of course, you know the story of Jaggi. He was seized in 2017, November 2017. He was bundled into the back of a van by plainclothes policemen, tortured, forced to sign a confession after being tortured, etc., etc. I mean, it's the most outrageous flouting of any sort of rule of law that India did. And he's a British citizen. This is what makes it so astounding, that the British government has done absolutely nothing for 9 years nearly to try and free Jagtar Singh Johal, one of our own citizens, who was arbitrarily detained in India, still awaiting any sort of sentence. And of course, you know, he's got all these charges, which of course he's denied. Anyway, so in where are we? In May 2022, the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention formally did rule his detention as arbitrary under international law. So again, officially, under international law, his detention is seen as arbitrary. And the UN demanded his immediate release. And subsequently, he was, of the 9 charges he was charged under, he was finally acquitted in one of those cases at the Moga District Court in March last year. But he's still on trial for 8 other charges, identical charges, which in theory, due to double jeopardy laws under normal democratic rule of law, he cannot be tried for the same charge twice. So in other words, he's been cleared of that charge, so the other 8 charges should automatically just collapse. No, not in India. It doesn't work like that. You know. Anyway, so a separate long-running demand from Sikh campaigners that is aligned with this is that Britain must finally hold a public inquiry into the British government's involvement in Operation Blue Star. Alongside the Jaggi story, that remains yet another promise by the British government, the Labour government, to deliver. So they have promised, we will free Jagtar Singh Johal, we will deliver the inquiry into Operation Blue Star and the British government and the British military, specifically, their involvement in Operation Blue Star. Yet 2 years of the Labour government, all this still remains completely and utterly unresolved. And then, so what's happened recently? Well, the Foreign Office, as we know, and I did say this a few weeks ago, the Foreign Office has appointed a new guy to take charge of cases like Jaggi. It's the first ever special envoy for Britons detained overseas in complex cases, his job title. It was a role created specifically after years and years of criticism, people like me, people like you guys, pressuring the government, saying you've got to do something about it. So they created this role. And the man given that job is a guy called Alistair Burt. He's a former Conservative right-wing Middle East minister. And he was appointed by the Labour government to fulfill a pledge that David Lammy, our former Foreign Secretary, made when he was still in opposition. Because remember, in opposition, they said, oh, yes, we demand that you free Jagtar Singh Johal. They demanded Rishi Sunak, who was Prime Minister, a Hindu, you must get Jaggi released. And now, of course, the Labour government are in power. Well, it's taken them 2 years, but now we have a new appointment of a new guy. And Jaggi's brother, Gurpreet Singh Johal, has finally met this guy, Bert, and the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, a lady called Alice Jill Edwards, has apparently now publicly welcomed this new appointment of this guy, Bert, as a genuinely significant step, she said. Now, great. So it's important this because a UN torture expert going on the record in support sounds great, but does it mean anything? Well, it's not nothing to use a double negative. It does mean something. At least there's movement, at least on the face of it. But firstly, the human rights organization Redress has already flagged that the new envoy sits inside the ministry called the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. That is the same department whose inconsistent handling of cases like Jagtar's created the pressure for the role in the first place. In other words, he now sits in the same department that's just done nothing for years and created the situation. And secondly, Gurpreet has now himself, Jaggi's brother Gurpreet, has now met just a rotating cast of at least 5 different foreign secretaries since 2017. And every single one who's, offered all sorts of warm words, particularly on camera. And yet here we are. So an envoy, it's a new structure, but it's not an outcome. It's just another political moving the chairs around. So do we believe that it's different now? As I always say, I'll only believe it when Jaggi is back home in Scotland, in Dunbarton, not before. But I mean, one interesting angle on this guy, Burt, he's a Conservative ex-minister, and he was appointed by a Labour government. So in other words, from the opposite party, from the opposition. And it's aimed to fix a problem 7 years of governments from both parties failed to fix. And so you could see it as a genuinely encouraging sign that the whole issue is rising above party politics. It's not about point scoring, because both parties actually now maybe seem to be working together, maybe it is a genuine step forward. Or is it just another convenient way for Westminster to look like it's doing something without actually having to do anything about it? And I'm sighing again because, well, as I say, we can only judge by the results. So great, this guy's appointed, but again, we can only judge him by his results. Let's hope something happens. Anyway, let's move on. Gosh, running out of time already. Bishnoi. Interesting. There's a classified Canada Border Services Agency report that's just been obtained by Global News, and it's now actually sort of hit the mainstream. It's called the Bishnoi Gang, an emerging threat in Canada, and it's been circulated to immigration officers, actually apparently at the back end of last year, December last year. And it documents, in the CBSA's own words, the gang's demonstrated use of Canadian immigration programs for criminal purposes. And it warns that Indian nationals on study and work permits are increasingly turning up as participants in organised criminal activity linked to the network. Surprise, surprise. So again, it's no real surprise if you've been following, obviously what's been going on. But the report's central case study is a guy called Satinderjit Singh, obviously Goldie Brar. He's part of that Operation Hardball. He's wanted under the United States Department of Justice's Operation Hardball. And actually, interestingly, the Indian authorities have actually designated him as a terrorist as well under the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And he has publicly claimed responsibility for killing Sidhu Musiwala. Now, Goldie Brar entered Canada on a student visa. Again, one of these visas in 2017, apparently to attend Thompson Rivers University in British Columbia. So this report says it remains unknown whether he ever actually attended any classes. I think we can probably guess the truth of that. And he applied for refugee status in 2019, and then, of course, never showed up for his hearing in 2022, effectively abandoning the claim without consequence. So Canada put him on its most wanted list in May 2023, but then quietly dropped him from that list later the same year with no explanation. So Indian investigators estimate that the wider Bishnoi network at roughly 700 members, and Punjab police apparently alone have tracked at least 2,500 known hideouts used by Bishnoi's operatives. So, and one CBSA criminologist said quite plainly, Canada's own foreign student program handed the network both entry and a ready-made recruitment pool. At the same time as Indian nationals' share of Canadian study visas fell from around 41 to around 25%, amid an 83% drop in the program overall over the past 2 years. So in other words, this visa program has just become a gateway to people like Goldie Brar and others who just want to ply their criminal trade in Canada. Now, of course, there are comparisons to the H-1B visa discussion in the United States. And there is a difference here, but ultimately the result is the same, but there are differences. Different countries, different visa categories, different set of allegations. But what both stories do share is a genuine pattern, an evidence-based pattern. Legitimate immigration programs exploited by people that they were never built for, discovered afterward by investigative journalism, people like me, well, I won't give myself credit, but other investigative journalists, are not discovered by the immigration systems themselves. In other words, it's taken ordinary people to actually uncover how these systems are being exploited by India and Indian criminals. And one little detail that does need a little bit more attention: Goldie Bra being dropped from Canada's most wanted list without explanation back in 2023. It's exactly the sort of bureaucratic situation that would actually never really be talked about unless it hadn't been for a global news investigation, if they hadn't gone digging through some old classified report to find it. And lists like that don't shrink by accident. It means someone in the Canadian system made an active decision to stop publicly hunting a man Indian authorities called a designated terrorist, at more or less the same moment that Ottawa was navigating its worst diplomatic rupture with Delhi over the Najjar killing. So the timing's very curious, isn't it? Now, there's no proven connection. You know, we can't sort of state factually that there has to be a connection why Goldie Bra was dropped from the list just a few months after Najjar was killed and that diplomatic spat between India and Canada. But, you know, you can start joining a few dots there and coming up with all sorts of pictures. Anyway, let's move on. And so the time is marching on. I just want to quickly cover this story, which is about Warris Punjab Day. I do like to talk about Warris Punjab Day because as I keep saying when I do talk about Warris Punjab Day, I believe they hold the key to the future of Northwest India. And by Northwest India, of course, I'm referring to Punjab and what will be Khalistan. Akali Dal, Warris Punjab Day, to give the formal title, has now named its very first candidate for next year's Punjab Assembly elections. Still just over a year away. And the choice is very, very deliberate. And it's very symbolic. Satwant Singh, he's the son of Kehar Singh, one of the men convicted of conspiring in the assassination of Indira Gandhi back in 1984 and executed in 1989. So Satwant Singh will contest the Basi Patana constituency. So the announcement was made in Amritsar by Tarsem Singh. He's Amritpal's father. And Tarsem is, as I say, he's the father of Amritpal Singh. And Amritpal himself is the imprisoned Kador Sahib MP. So, and Tarsem framed this whole announcement explicitly as a deliberate act of respect for Shaheed families and Panthic principles. So again, the symbolism behind this was very, very deliberate, and it sends a very, very important message. As you rightly say, Murgiv Logs Rinku, long live Khalistan Punjab. Couldn't agree with you more. So, Gaman Grail, a big Sat Sri Akal to you, sir, as well. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you online, as always. Anyway, so yeah, this appointment, it's not an isolated gesture. The party actually has formally constituted a 5-member parliamentary board. Of course, that key number, Panj 5. So they've put together a 5-member board coordinated by Kabal Singh to vet future candidates specifically on their service to the Panth, their organisational discipline, and of course their loyalty. And that is all criteria, all designed very deliberately, and all but guarantee that the more names like Satwant Singh will come forward. In other words, every candidate that will be announced will no doubt have a very symbolic nature behind their candidacy. And so whatever you do make of politics, the signals coming out of these guys is unambiguous. 40 months out from polling day, Warris Punjab Day's first move was to put the son of one of the most notorious names in modern Sikh political history on its ballot paper. And it also, of course, lands at a very awkward moment for the older Akali Dal establishment, because reports this week of a meeting between Sukhbir Badal and Narendra Modi have now fueled speculation of a new Shiromani Akali Dal BJP alliance ahead of those elections next year. So this is precisely the kind of accommodation with Delhi that Warris Punjab Day's Shaheed family candidate list is very deliberately built to not just distance itself, but contrast itself to the establishment, the deep state of India, the BJP, and clearly now the Shiromani Akali Dal. We were right to be suspicious of the SAD, and now they're in talks with the BJP. So unsurprisingly, Warris Punjab Day said, right, That's fine. The battle lines are now clearly delimited. That's what I'm looking for. So if you put these two sort of Punjab stories together, the choice being offered to voters now does look too neat to be accidental. So, of course, on one side, you've got the old guard party, whose own leaders reportedly cozying up to the man leading the party many Sikhs hold most responsible for Punjab's grievances, Narendra Modi. And on the other side, of course, this new wonderful movement, whose first electoral act is to nominate the son of a man executed for killing Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister who ordered that awful Operation Blue Star and Operation Shanti. So you don't need to endorse either path to see what Warriors Punjab Day actually understands the story that it's deliberately telling through its candidate list. And Sukhbir Badal's outreach to Modi clearly sets out very clearly what the SAD's agenda is. And that's very clear. Stay in power at any cost, or get power at any cost, even if it means selling out their soul to the BJP. And by that, read the RSS. So the message is very clear to all you guys in the Punjab. You can support your oppressors, or you can support those who will bring freedom. And ultimately, I just came across this video. I got to talk about Warriors Punjab Day in Amritpal. And I always talk about grassroots campaigning. I just want to show you a quick video. Here we go. That's it. It's this rural Punjab, apparently. It's just a local resident erecting this this pro-Amritpal sign. I think it says, I did actually ask when I saw this video, I did actually comment, could somebody please translate the Punjabi? And apparently, and you guys can correct me on this if it's wrong, but people said it says press conference this way. So I'm assuming that's what it says. But ultimately, it's Amritpal. Indeed, TC, it's Amritpal Singh, G. So, but it's wonderful to see that even, I talk about grassroots, just simple, in some locals, small house is just erecting a huge sign. This is why Warriors Punjab Day is, I believe, the most powerful political movement to hit Punjab in recent times, because it is reaching into every corner of Punjab. People are finally seeing a future of hope. They're seeing the potential of Khalistan. So in other words, the whole Khalistan movement, don't forget Amritpal Singh is a Khalistani. It proves it is not a fringe movement, that people like this gentleman here clearly have hope in their eyes. They see Amritpal Singh as freeing them from the yoke of Indian fascism. Let's call it what it is. So anyway, great, as I say, it's great to see this. And yeah, I'll keep an eye on Warriors Punjab Day, as I always do. And as things progress, I'll keep tabs on their political progress. Next year's elections are going to be fascinating. I'll obviously cover those as best I can. Right, let's move on to the comments. Right, you guys, thank you for all your comments. This was where are you? Comments. There you are. Yeah, this was after the podcast I did with Dr. Growell last week. It was again fascinating podcast, as they always are, and loads of comments after that one. We talked about Manmohan Singh and various other things. The United States of India was the theme around the podcast. And Nirmal Singh, who one of our regular commenters, thank you, Nirmal Singh. Indeed, Khalistan, we say it every show, don't we? So the conclusion's very clear. There is only one solution, Khalistan Zindabad. As you rightly say, TC, Khalistan Zindabad, liberate Punjab from India. Indeed. Murgi Vlogs Rinku, did I see you online? I think I did see you online live, actually. Punjab and Punjabi peoples are not safe without Khalistan. Again, it comes back to the same theme that we always end up talking about. When we talk about this regular oppression, the regular persecution, there can never be a negotiated settlement with Delhi. Punjab and all its suffering will never stop. It doesn't matter how much you talk, how much you politically campaign with Delhi, you are fighting a Brahmanical elite that will never, ever give you what you want. So this is why Khalistan is the only solution. Sikhs will never be truly free and safe until they get Khalistan. This is why every Sikh must fight for it, must believe in it. DTST, thank you, DTST. You've been very active on all the comments. And your comments have always been very lengthy and very detailed. In fact, sadly, too detailed to sort of talk about on our comments column, because otherwise we'd be here for 2 hours. But thank you for your comments. But basically, the arguments are essentially, obviously, very well researched discussions about the demographics, and it does go back to what we have discussed at length about the demographics and this weakness, this inherent demographic weakness of Sikhs, is that they are so dispersed so widely, and there are so few, relatively speaking, in the world to really in itself create a country of Khalistan. If all, as I said before, if all the Sikhs were in just one place, Khalistan would happen probably tomorrow. It's just the fact that they are so widely dispersed does make it harder, and it does give people like DTST a very valid argument. Say you're never going to get Khalistan because you're all too you're not numerous enough, and you're all too spread around. So. Is there anything in that comment that you wanted that was about anything else? No, it wasn't. Anyway, that was it. So let's move on. Punjab solution, Khalistan only, from Murgiv's Law Ring Q. And again, DTST sort of wades in, but SSK Trucking said, look, Indian Punjabi, the Dalits by Brahman's holy book, Sikh. Oh yeah, this is all about equality. And again, one of DTST's arguments, and it is valid to some degree, saying, look, even Sikhs are socially structured. There is a class system in the Sikh community, like there is in every human society. Here in the UK, we have a class structure, the working class, the middle class, the upper class, and the aristocracy. But it's a fairly loose social structure, but it is there. It's almost subconscious. You can't help it. But that's what human beings do. We always put ourselves in some sort of form of social hierarchy. It's human nature. You can't change it. And Sikhs are no different. Sikhs have their own hierarchy, as I understand it. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. The Jats appear to be, let's say, sort of the upper echelons, for want of a better description, of Sikh society. They are apparently the agriculturalists, the farmers, the landowners, etc. And that, according to DTST, has created resentment amongst other lower classes, let's call it, of Sikhs. It's not a caste system. It's very, very different. And this is what I stress very importantly. It is not a caste system. It is a class system. That's different. And that is normal and human. DT also tried to gaslight you on Serena Virgie's show. Yeah, I think he's enjoying himself. I think he's a little bit mischievous, is DTST, but I'm not dismissing him, because he at least he comes in with an argument. We don't necessarily agree with his arguments, but it's his right to voice them, and I always encourage it, because we can't be what's called an echo chamber here. It's great that most of us align with everything that we talk about Khalistan, etc. But having an echo chamber doesn't advance the movement. We need critics. We need people like DTST to actually ask us the uncomfortable questions, like Sikh Jedi did the other day, demanding that we actually respond with our arguments to validate what we're saying. So absolutely. But anyway, so SSK Trucking actually answers saying, look, Dalits are part of that structure, that caste system structure. That is an unambiguous, deliberate system that's been in existence for 2,000 years. But Sikhs are classed in classes that is just natural social order. And it happens in every social order, whether you're Chinese, whether you're British, whether you're American, whether you're African. All of us in our societies have a hierarchy just through human nature. That is not a caste system. That's very, very different. So anyway, hopefully that sort of addresses some of those points. TC. Oh, hello, TC. You're on here as well. We learn the truth of the matter through truthful journalism. Thank you. Well, thank you for your comment. It was a fascinating podcast. Dr. Manmohan Singh. He was quite a character. He achieved an awful lot economically. Was it this comment about the economics? He did basically save India economically. He opened up India. India prior to that, what do they call it? The licensed Raj or something, I think the term was. But basically, it was struggling. It had no investment. It needed money to get itself out of a mess, an economic mess. And it was Manmohan Singh that did that. He opened up India economically. And so India enjoyed a massive economic growth thanks to Manmohan Singh, bless him. So he did a huge amount for the nation of India that the BJP, frankly, inherited, longer term. Nirmal's back again. By Guru's blessing, we're going to destroy Hindu way of thinking. We are. As I always say, fascism only lasts so long. It will finally fall apart. As you say, all humans are born equal. We are all equal. We are all born equal. And we leave the world equally. The caste system is just an artificial structure imposed by those who control and rule, the 1 in 10s, the regular viewers. Back again, and then Wabosa. Hello, Wabosa. Yes, you popped in about it was about the schooling system, and it was a big question. Why? What is the point of going to school in Punjab or indeed in India? And reference back to what I was saying about the RSS controlling 20,000 schools across India. All those kids who go to an RSS school, they're just going to emerge as RSS bots, clones. Their whole mind will have just been completely indoctrinated into Hindu philosophy. And the question now, and of course in Punjab, for example, bringing in Hindi-only speaking teachers, what's that doing to Punjabi kids? It's questionable. He who controls the schools controls the future, is the reality. So there is a question. And actually online learning now, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it for primary level or whatever, but certainly online learning at university level, for example, is now growing massively. Certainly here in the UK, universities are shrinking and dying. But yeah, maybe remote learning is the future. Dharmender Banins, thank you for joining us. Long live Khalistan. Khalistan's in the bad. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you. Mr. Angad. This is an interesting one. We will need a United States of Khalistan as well. No, we won't actually, because Khalistan will be one united nation. It doesn't need, it won't have, well, it might have states within it. So I suppose technically you can call it United States, but ultimately it will be a completely united nation. It won't be as big as the United States of America, for example. That's different. And the US does work differently, primarily because of its history and how it eventually became the United States. And it's so geographically vast that each state does have a lot of autonomy, but obviously overseen at federal level. Khalistan, I don't think will have that same structure because it will be a lot smaller. It'll be easier to manage centrally, and it will have regions, states, whatever. It's natural, every country does. But I think it will be more central as opposed to a United States sort of federation sort of structure. But anyway, but yeah, it will happen pretty soon. We don't know when. By definition, we never know really when. How can we control other people to integrate with Khalistan and not become radical, dogmatic? In other words, how can we maintain the purity of Khalistan? A very good question, a very serious question. It will be down to the governance model. It will be down to how society is running Khalistan. Watch my podcast with Dr. Grail too, because we have talked about that, the governance model, where everybody will be treated equal. It will be more about the carrot than the stick in terms of how it runs the nation. It will run it so people will want to be there. They will want to be a citizen of Khalistan. They won't be forced to be citizens of Khalistan like India, where Tamils, Manipurians, J&Kans, Punjabis are all forced to be Indians, literally almost by brute force in many cases. Khalistan won't be that. Khalistan will be, you're free to come and go. If you don't like it, leave. But if you like it, you're welcome and you will be treated equally. That's the difference. And I think that is how Khalistan purity will be maintained, because, of course, it will follow the Sikh faith. It will be governed by the philosophy of Sikhi, which in itself is so highly respected anyway across the world, that why wouldn't it succeed? And again, you only need to look at the Sikh empire to have the answer to that question. The Nanima, or then Anima, Manmohan Singh will always be in our hearts. Yeah, as I said, he left a heck of a legacy. He was quite a character, Manmohan Singh. And you're back again, Dr. Mano, he's ever alive in all Indian hearts for the economy. Yeah, indeed, it was, as I said, he was the guy who saved the Indian economy. So bless him. Jagtar City, very well explained via G. Thanks. Khalistan's in the bad. Again, couldn't disagree with that. DTST actually did say, Manmohan Ji, had he been there, he would object to Khalistan. Oh, that's a big statement. I don't know. I haven't researched Manmohan Singh's personal politics enough to actually make that call. I've said in the past that Dr. Ambedkar, for example, would have been a Khalistani based on his thinking, because I've obviously done a lot of work on Dr. Ambedkar. Manmohan Singh, interesting one. Maybe that's something we need to dig into and work out. Would Manmohan Singh have been a Khalistani? I don't know. DTST is back again. Next few centuries. Global powers. They only made Pakistan and India to cater for Muslims and Hindus. Sikhs have to confront the truth. Their numbers dictate their future. Well, yes and no. I don't need to rehash the demographics argument, but yeah, global powers dictate global forces. And this is why the Khalistan movement is actually being very clever, because they are now engaging with the global powers to say, here's an alternative, and a good alternative for peace in that region, Khalistan. So actually, DTST, the Khalistan movement is winning because it is engaging those global powers that you refer to. And you're back again. It's another. You talk about partition. Sunday, the numbers were roughly 50-50. Those who moved from Pakistan did so to avoid the violence. It was not, they didn't move out of choice. It was, I fancy moving over the border to India, or I fancy moving over to the border of Pakistan. That wasn't just like a choice made on a sunny afternoon over a cup of tea. It was literally, we better flee for our lives because the border's coming down, and if we're on the wrong side, we might die. So there was not much choice in that matter, unfortunately, DGST. On that one, I do have to pick you up on. A Satsri account to you, sir. Thanks, Angus and Dr. Grail. Gimon Grail, I think you're online. Satsri account to you, Gimon Grail. Thanks for your continued loyalty watching the show, and of course your lovely daily comment. SSK Trucking, did I see you online? I don't think I did. Anyway, no, I didn't. Anyway, thank you, Scott. Well, thank you for your comment. Jasveer Singh's there. Thanks, Sir G. Absolutely, in the United States. Gurpreet Singh with a load of love hearts and some Punjabi. And the final comment goes to Bikram Singh, Khalistan Sindabad with a Satsri account. Indeed. That's it. We're over time, but I better close the show. But thank you to you guys. Thanks for being online. What are you saying? There's a little bit of a DTST bashing going on by the looks of it. He doesn't seem to be online at the moment. Maybe we'll watch retrospectively. Oh, Hobo's joined us. Hello, Hobo. What did you say? DTS is writing the same Islamic rant everywhere. Yes, indeed. I think you picked up. He's clearly very active on our threads. So, but keep it polite. All I would say is keep it polite. We don't have to agree with him, but we can always respect his view, his point of view. We can argue against it, etc. So, anyway, that's it for today. Thanks so much, you guys. Do keep the comments coming in. Thank you for being online. Thanks for joining me live. It's great to see you guys when I'm talking to you. It sort of helps that sort of lovely, warm, fuzzy feeling that we all get when we're all together, chatting together. But yeah, do keep your comments coming in. I'll upload the show as well. I think YouTube does its thing. And then when it's formally sort of up there, then please obviously put comments under that video as well, because then I can then use them in this part of the show as well. But that is it. Don't forget, you can email me, message@satledgetv.com. Anything you'd like me to talk about or any links. Thank you for you guys who've been doing that. Much appreciated. If I don't respond to the email immediately, it's usually because I'm rushing, but I do read your emails. Thank you for that, and do keep them coming. But that's it. Have a great day. All being well, God willing, touch wood, I'll be back live at 5 tomorrow on Wednesday afternoon, as usual. And that's it. Have a great night. Go in peace and all that. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. To TTS for Prime Minister of Birmingham. Right, that's it, guys. I found the off. Have a great night, guys.